Alien scientist shuddered as the human calmly snapped his finger back into place. A sharp, wet crack split the silence of the containment suite. Mason's breath hissed between clenched teeth as he forced the fractured finger back into alignment, knuckles white from the effort. The sound ricocheted off sterile walls, echoing in the hush. On the other side of the transparent barrier, Dr. Lysira jerked in surprise, her luminous skin rippling with anxious emerald and violet bands. Her three triangular eyes widened, the crystalline crown atop her head pulsing with a startled flare. Mason flexed his hand, wincing, then caught her gaze and offered a lopsided, battle-weary grin. "Don't worry, Doc. Just a little human maintenance. You should see what I do with a dislocated shoulder." Lysira's voice, musical and fragile, fluttered through the comm channel. "Your self-inflicted injury. It is unnecessary. We could have provided assistance." He arched an eyebrow, studying her, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. "With all due respect, I've had rougher welcomes. You folks sure know how to roll out the red carpet." A shimmer of confusion crossed her face, her colors swirling as she worked to parse his meaning. "Red carpet? This is an idiom? Means I wasn't exactly invited." He flexed his hand again. "But I'm getting used to your hospitality." For a heartbeat, Lysira seemed to forget her caution. She leaned in, the shifting light of her skin casting soft patterns over the barrier. "You joke, even now. I find this perplexing." Mason shrugged. "What else am I supposed to do? Cry?" He nodded at his bound wrist. "I'd clap, but you might take that as a threat." She hesitated, her bioluminescence flickering through nervous pastels. Mason watched her, curiosity rising. There was something more in her gaze, an intensity that belied the clinical detachment she tried to maintain. Lysira composed herself, drawing upright with studied grace. "Mason," she said, lowering her voice to a hush. "I must clarify the circumstances. Your capture was not an act of aggression. My people, the Sarathi, are facing extinction. A pathogen is spreading, faster than any of our science can counter. Your regenerative biology, it is unlike any we have observed. You may hold the cure." Mason's jaw tightened, wariness flickering behind his eyes. "So, I'm a lab rat with a miracle immune system. Is that it?" She shook her head, crystalline crown casting refracted halos over her elongated face. "No. Or, not only. I volunteered for this assignment. I need to understand how you resist not just disease, but fear itself." Her words grew softer, almost confessional. "Our healers cannot work under such pressure. I wish to comprehend how you endure." He met her gaze, reading the vulnerability behind her luminous facade. "I'm not fearless, Doctor. I just don't let it run the show." He let the words hang, then added, "You want to understand how to keep moving forward, even when you're terrified. That about right?" Her eyes glimmered, the colors of her skin deepening. "Yes." Their moment was severed by the sudden, sharp hiss of the suite doors. Dr. Veyron entered, tall and severe, his Sarathi features sharpened by authority. The lights of his own crystalline crown burned with the cold hue of command. He glanced from Lysira to Mason, voice clipped. "Begin preparations for full-spectrum analysis. All regenerative pathways must be mapped, no exceptions." Lysira's composure returned with visible effort. "Yes, Director." Her hands trembled only slightly as she gathered her equipment, eyes lingering on Mason for a final instant before following Veyron's precise instructions. When the room emptied, Mason slumped against the padded bench, cradling his hand. The adrenaline faded, replaced by a hollow ache, physical and otherwise. The reality of his predicament pressed in. He'd survived war zones and shipwrecks, but this was a different battlefield. One where he didn't know the rules. The next morning, the suite was awash in pale antiseptic light. Lysira returned, this time alone, her manner less guarded. She positioned a halo of scanning orbs around Mason's head, the machines humming softly. "Remain still, please," she murmured, but her eyes studied him with a new kind of focus. He obliged, silent as the neural patterns unfurled across the screens. The scanners tracked the microscopic fractures knitting in his finger, the bruises on his wrist fading before their sensors. Lysira's breath caught, her hands hovering reverently above the console. "Your tissue regeneration. It is astonishing. How do you do this?" Mason offered a tired smile. "If I could bottle it, Doc, I'd be rich." The clinical pretense between them faltered. Lysira's fingers trembled as she powered down the scanners. "My kin, my own bondmates are now infected. I am afraid I cannot help them in time." He watched her, saw the cracks in her composure. "Then don't waste time on what you can't change. Focus on what you can." He lowered his voice, conspiratorial. "Let's figure this out together. Maybe we can beat this thing." Quietly. She stared at him, hope and doubt vying in her luminous eyes. The crown atop her head shimmered uncertainly, casting soft rainbows across the glass. For a moment she seemed on the verge of saying something more, but only nodded, her thoughts in turmoil. As Lysira powered down the equipment and prepared to leave, Mason's presence lingered with her, his resilience and unexpected kindness echoing in her mind long after the door sealed shut behind her. Time passed in the research ward, measured not in hours but in the rhythm of procedures, the hush of machinery, the soft timbre of voices that slipped through sterile barriers. Lysira's objectivity began to falter, crumbling beneath the pressure of Mason's indefatigable humor and the quiet courage he radiated. Each day, the procedures grew harsher. Sarathi technicians and medics, sometimes faceless behind their glassy masks, subjected Mason to electrical stimuli, deep tissue biopsies, and radiant scanners that left faint temporary burns on his skin. He endured it all, jaw clenched, eyes steady. His wounds closed almost instantly, raw flesh knitting and bruises fading before Lysira's instruments could fully record the trauma. She watched, fascinated and deeply troubled. At first, she told herself she was only collecting data, that her empathy was a scientific asset. But when Mason grinned, even as the needle drove into his arm and quipped, "Is this the deluxe spa treatment, or do I have to ask for the mud bath?" She felt something shift inside her, some old boundary dissolving. Their sessions lengthened. After the last technician departed and the surveillance drones powered down, they began to swap stories, filling the sterile air with memories and longing. "So," Mason said one evening, lying back as Lysira adjusted a set of neural diodes on his temple, "you ever seen a thunderstorm? Not one of your programmed weather displays. Real thunder, lightning, wind that tears the sky apart." Lysira's head tilted in curiosity, her crown flickering in soft aquamarine. "Our world is luminous, but our weather is tranquil by design. We have shielded our cities from volatility for centuries. What is it like to live at the mercy of chaos?" He smiled, eyes distant. "You never forget the sound. Thunder's like the earth itself growling. When I was a kid, my family lived in a valley where storms would roll in with no warning. My mother called it sky's temper tantrum. But it was beautiful, terrifying, but beautiful." She traced a finger along the interface, gaze intent. "And yet, your people remain, despite danger." "Yeah, we're stubborn that way. Sometimes stupid, sometimes brave." He glanced at her, teasing. "Kind of like volunteering for a one-way trip to an alien planet to poke a human in a box." A blush of lavender shimmered over her skin. "I suppose we are both guilty of questionable decisions?" He laughed, the sound echoing in the clinical chamber. "Tell me about Sarathi. Not the science. What's it like at night?" Her voice softened. When the sun sets, the cities bloom with light. The buildings are latticed crystal, woven with bioluminescent vines. Even the rivers glow beneath the bridges. My kin used to gather on the highest spires, watching the auroras dance. Now, those places are empty. Entire communities are isolated, cut off to slow the infection. She paused, voice trembling. I have not seen my home in so long. It feels like a dream I'm slowly forgetting. The silence stretched between them, heavy with shared loss. Isolation gets to you, Mason said quietly. Back on Earth, I worked out on the deep space rigs, weeks without seeing another face. You start talking to the walls. Some people find comfort in it. I used to. Now, I just want to feel the sun again. Lysira looked at him, her 3 eyes luminous. I prolong these sessions, she admitted, because I want to understand you. But also, because I crave your perspective, this closeness. I used to find solace in solitude. Now it feels like a slow extinction. Mason reached up, gently brushing his fingers along her cheek where the glassy barrier was thinnest. Her skin glowed beneath his touch, swirling with soft, iridescent colors, pearl and rose and gold, rising and falling in time with her breath. She leaned into him, the longing in her luminous gaze mirrored in his own. Maybe we can save each other from extinction, he murmured. Before the moment could deepen, the suite doors slid open with a mechanical sigh. Dr. Veyron strode in, his presence as cold and precise as always, oblivious to the charged hush in the room. Continue with the hemolysis sequence, Dr. Lysira, he intoned, consulting his datapad. We are behind schedule. Lysira drew back, her crown dimming to a cool blue as she retreated into the role of scientist. Mason's hand dropped to his lap, fingers curling with restraint. The bond between them hung unspoken, a filament of light stretched taut between hope and duty. The next morning, the research ward was quieter than usual. Lysira set up a tray of crystalline slides, her hands moving with less certainty than usual. As she reached for a calibration tool, a thin splinter of crystal snapped beneath her fingers, slicing into the web of her hand. A bead of opalescent blood welled up, catching the light. Hold on, Mason said, swinging his legs over the bench and rising, heedless of the monitoring sensors. Let me help. He reached for the first aid kit, but Lysira waved him off, her pride prickling. It is only a minor wound, she began, but Mason was already tearing open a sterile wipe. Trust me, he insisted, dabbing the cut gently. The sight of her blood made his chest tighten. It was wrong to see her hurt, even so slightly. On impulse, he pressed his own finger to the wound, letting a single drop of his blood mingle with hers. The contact sent a faint electric jolt through both of them. Lysira gasped, skin flaring with startled color. Beneath his touch, the cut closed. The tissue regenerated almost instantly, the only sign of injury a faint shimmer on her palm. Her scanners, still active, erupted with cascading streams of data. Mason, she breathed, watching as the readings surged across her display. Your blood. It is compatible. The regenerative agents, look! He peered over her shoulder, eyes widening as he saw the biochemistry unfold on the screens. You mean, I could help? Really help? She nodded, voice trembling with emotion. This is it. This could be the foundation for a cure. You are not just a specimen, you are the key. A new urgency electrified the air. They both realized the gravity of their discovery. If they took their findings to Veyron, he would seize control, reducing Mason to a mere resource, and risk the exploitation or destruction of everything they'd built. But to keep it secret was to defy everything: the law, their orders, their own fears. Lysira reached for Mason's hand, her crystalline crown pulsing with a fierce resolve. We must decide. Do we hide this and risk everything, or surrender it and lose all say in what happens next? Mason squeezed her hand, the decision weighing on them both. I didn't survive all this just to watch someone else write the ending. If you're with me, we do this together. Quietly, carefully, our way. Tears shimmered in Lysira's eyes, her skin swirling with colors brighter than any hope she had known in years. Then I am with you, for as long as we have. In a moment of shared hope and desperation, they embraced in the center of the lab, surrounded by flickering monitors and silent machines. Lysira's crown blazed with determination, casting rainbows across the glass. The world outside receded, and in the hush between heartbeats, a new promise took root. One born of defiance, longing, and the fragile, luminous possibility of salvation. Determined to act before Veyron or the ruling conclave could clamp down on their discovery, Lysira plunged herself into the Sarathi archives with a ferocity Mason had never seen in her. Fingers trembling, crystalline crown flickering in urgent patterns, she bypassed security barriers and navigated code-laden labyrinths. Mason kept watch by the lab door, muscles tensed for the sound of approaching boots, but the world around them held its breath. As data scrolled across the terminal, Lysira's eyes widened, her breath catching in her throat. She followed digital trails through encrypted memos, private communiques, and research logs, her mind assembling the hidden story with dread clarity. Mason, she whispered, voice barely audible. Come here. He moved to her side, scanning the lines of alien script that leapt and flickered, his own face hardening as Lysira translated in rushed, broken sentences. The plague. It was not a natural mutation. It was engineered. Her hands trembled. The Jaren, our rivals. They intended it as a weapon, to weaken us, not destroy us. But it spun out of control. They never imagined it would kill so many. The enormity of it swept through the room, heavier than gravity. Mason's jaw clenched, anger and disbelief colliding behind his eyes. All those deaths, all that suffering, because of a war no one else wanted. Lysira nodded, her skin clouding with stormy hues. There is more. The Jaren are monitoring us, watching our research. They want to control the cure, to use it as leverage against the conclave, maybe the entire sector. A chill spread through Mason's veins. We're not just racing against time, we're being hunted. She reached for him, needing his solidity, his unyielding warmth. He pulled her close, letting her shudder against his chest. For a moment, the sterile world faded, leaving only the thrum of heartbeats and the fierce need to hold on to something real. What do we do? She asked, her voice muffled by his shirt. He answered without hesitation. We run. Take the research to someone who'll use it for healing, not power. There's got to be a network. People who don't answer to Veyron or the conclave. She pulled back, searching his face. If we're caught, we'll be exiled. Or worse. His hand cradled her jaw, thumb brushing her cheek where bioluminescent color bloomed beneath his touch. We'll save lives. That's worth any price. Torn between the weight of her people's laws and the clarity of her own conscience, Lysira hesitated. Her mind darted through all she stood to lose, her position, her kin, the remnants of her old certainties. But the alternative, a cure locked away, hoarded by those who started the nightmare, felt like a betrayal too deep to bear. She nodded, voice steady with new resolve. You're right. We cannot let them win. Mason grinned, wild and alive. So, how do you feel about a jailbreak? Lysira's lips curved in a nervous smile. I have a plan. But it will require improvisation. They moved quickly. Lysira pulled up a false security alert, redirecting surveillance feeds to loop innocuous footage. She loaded Mason's blood work, genome maps, and regenerative protocols onto portable crystals. stowing them in a slim satchel. Mason scavenged the medbay for portable analysis units, serum vials, and sterilization gear, packing them into a field kit with practiced efficiency. To make it look convincing, Lysira said, breathing hard, "You will have to play the hostile specimen." He snorted. "I've had practice being the bad guy." He wrapped his arm loosely around her neck, miming a chokehold, but his hand trembled ever so slightly. "You sure you're ready?" She gazed up at him, her crown shining with defiant light. "For this? Yes." They rehearsed the sequence. Lysira would send a distress code, Mason would barge into the corridor, dragging her as his hostage, and they would slip through a maintenance hatch before security could triangulate their position. The trick was making it look desperate but not lethal. Enough chaos to buy them minutes, not seconds. They stood together in the center of the lab, tension thrumming in the charged air. Lysira's hands lingered on Mason's chest as she adjusted the field kit's strap over his shoulder. "If we make it out," she whispered, "what then?" He brushed a strand of glowing hair from her brow, voice thick with hope. "Then we find your healers. We save as many as we can. And after that, we write our own story." She smiled, luminous and trembling, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "You are more Sarathi than many born to this world." Mason leaned in, his lips finding hers in a determined, defiant kiss, one that tasted of fear and promise, the sweet ache of possibility. Lysira pressed into him, her crown flaring with brilliant resolve, casting rainbows on the sterile walls. For a heartbeat the world stilled, balanced on the knife edge of everything to come. A warning chime shattered the moment. Lysira's panel flashed red. Security sweep incoming, automated drones deployed. With no time to waste, they took one last look at the lab, the cradle of secrets and sorrows, then slipped out, Mason's arm locked around Lysira in feigned aggression, her posture perfectly terrified. They traversed the corridors, moving quickly but not running, knowing that panic would bring instant attention. Drones hovered overhead, mechanical eyes tracking their movement. Mason's grip tightened as two guards rounded the corner, weapons half raised. "Back off!" he barked, voice rough. "She's coming with me! Try anything! She gets hurt!" The guards hesitated, uncertainty flickering in their angular eyes. Lysira whimpered, playing her role to the hilt, her crown dimming to a fearful blue. Mason maneuvered them toward the maintenance hatch Lysira had unlocked remotely, heart pounding with each step. The corridor lights strobed, alarms swelling in volume. "Now!" Lysira hissed. With a surge of motion, Mason yanked her through the narrow hatch. They tumbled into the service duct, the echo of pursuit fading as the hatch sealed behind them. Lysira triggered a false reading on the sensors. 2 life signs, now lost in the chaos of the sweep. They paused, breathless, pressed together in the dim, humming passage. Mason's forehead rested against hers, and for a moment there was nothing but the heat of their resolve, the mingled scent of fear and hope. "Ready?" he whispered. She nodded, determination blazing in her luminous gaze, for whatever comes. They set off deeper into the labyrinth, lab data and fragile hope strapped to their backs, unaware that high above, surveillance drones tracked every desperate move, silent witnesses to the start of their rebellion. Navigating the labyrinthine service corridors was a desperate ballet of shadows and silent footfalls. Lysira led Mason through tight, dimly lit passages, her crystalline crown dim to a furtive glow. Pipes rattled overhead, echoing the thud of their heartbeats. Mason pressed close, carrying the precious satchel of data and vials, trusting Lysira's every whispered instruction. They slipped through a rusted hatch and into the underbelly of the city. Lysira paused at an unmarked bulkhead, her fingers dancing across a hidden panel. With a soft hiss, the door slid open, revealing a cramped but brightly lit chamber, a world away from the sterile labs above. The scent of antiseptics and ionized air mingled with the hum of old machinery. Inside waited Dr. Tolan, a Sarathi with skin of shifting amber and eyes sharp with intelligence. His crystalline crown was battered but radiant, casting fractured light over walls lined with jury-rigged equipment and flickering holoscreens. The clinic was barely larger than a supply closet, yet it brimmed with hope. Charts of molecular structures, rows of makeshift incubators, and a table crowded with vials in every shade of blue and green. "You made it," Tolan greeted, relief and admiration in his tone. "And you brought the human." He extended a three-fingered hand to Mason, who gripped it, rough and warm. "Name's Mason," he said, voice tired but determined. "I hear you're our miracle worker." Tolan offered a crooked smile. "I'm no miracle worker, just a scientist with a cause. Lysira, the data you sent, it was everything. I've already begun synthesizing healing compounds using your protocols and Mason's initial samples. Early results are promising." Lysira's eyes shimmered with tears. Exhaustion and gratitude mingled. "You did all this in secret?" "We're not alone," Tolan replied, gesturing to a battered console displaying a network of worlds, some pulsing with red, infected, others blue, safe. "There are healers and sympathizers across the sector. We move quietly, share results in code. It's not much, but it's enough." Mason surveyed the cramped workspace, heart swelling with a hope he had not dared to name. "Tell me what you need." Tolan's gaze was steady. "We need more blood. The regenerative factor in your cells is remarkable, but we have to refine the serum, adjust it for Sarathi physiology. Every drop brings us closer." Mason rolled up his sleeve without hesitation, exposing a forearm already mottled with old bruises from previous draws. "I've got plenty. Take what you need." Lysira moved to his side, preparing the sterilizer. Her hands were gentle, voice soft. "You're certain?" He nodded. "If I can save even one life, it's worth it." The next hours blurred in a whirl of work. Tolan extracted samples and spun them in a battered centrifuge, while Lysira analyzed molecular bonds and recalibrated the synthesizer. Mason sat quietly, watching the two Sarathi collaborate, their words a dance of jargon and hope. He felt the beginnings of something larger than any of them, an alliance born not just of necessity, but of belief in the goodness of their cause. Occasionally, Lysira would catch Mason's gaze, her luminous eyes shining with pride. She marveled at his selflessness, the way he offered himself with no demand for reward. Her admiration deepened each time he winced and joked, "Let's just hope your people like their medicine with a dash of human stubbornness." Tolan's network pulsed with coded transmissions. Reports filtered in. A small settlement on the moon, Kalis, had seen its first recoveries. A healer on the trade world of Relan needed more serum. The infected zones were spreading, but so was the quiet spark of hope. During a rare lull, Tolan turned serious. "You know what this means, Lysira. If you go back now, there's no return. The Conclave will call you traitor. Exile, if you're lucky." Lysira straightened, her crown burning with defiance. "I have made my choice, Dr. Tolan. I cannot serve a system that would let our people die for the sake of politics. My loyalty is to life, not law." Mason squeezed her hand, pride swelling in his chest. "You're not alone in this." Tolan nodded, satisfied. "Then welcome to the rebellion. It's quieter than you'd think, but it matters." He passed Mason a nutrient bar. "Rest. You'll need your strength. We have more patients coming tonight." Word spreads fast when hope is on the wind. Mason leaned against the wall, exhaustion catching up to him. Lysira knelt beside him, her touch gentle on his shoulder. "You should sleep," she murmured. "I will watch over you." He smiled, catching her hand. "Only if you stay." She hesitated, then settled beside him on the narrow cot, their knees pressed together. For a long moment they simply breathed, sharing the hush of the makeshift clinic, the soft click of Toland's instruments, the thrum of their joined heartbeats. "Do you regret it?" Mason asked quietly, tracing the line of her cheekbone with his thumb. Lysira shook her head, her skin swirling with colors of resolve and longing. "No, I have never felt so certain." She leaned in, her lips finding his in a passionate kiss, a collision of gratitude, hope, and the sweet ache of possibility. Mason gathered her close, her luminous body fitting perfectly against his, the world narrowing to the warmth of their embrace. In the dim quarters, surrounded by battered equipment and whispered promises, they found a rare peace. When they finally parted, Lysira rested her head on Mason's chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart. Toland worked quietly nearby, respecting their moment. As exhaustion claimed them, Mason and Lysira clung to each other, knowing the revolution they'd sparked would not roar with guns or banners, but would spread, quiet and unstoppable, as long as hope endured. In the hush of the clinic, the promise of healing was born, fragile and defiant, lighting the darkness one life at a time. Their escape triggered a station-wide alert. Sirens wailed, crimson lights pulsing through corridors as Mason and Lysira slipped deeper into the maintenance shafts, their footsteps muffled by layers of dust and insulated piping. The air vibrated with tension, shouted commands echoed through the bulkheads, and the clang of boots on metal told them that security was closing in. Lysira led the way, her crystalline crown dimmed to near darkness. Mason followed, clutching the field kit of serum and data, sweat slicking his brow despite the chill. At every intersection, Lysira paused to listen, her elongated ears twitching for any hint of patrols. Twice they ducked into alcoves as searchlights swept past, illuminating walls etched with years of forgotten repairs. From a vent overhead, voices drifted down. 2 guards, breathless and anxious. Orders from the director. If they're found, separate the human and the scientist immediately. They're more dangerous together. Mason met Lysira's eyes through the gloom. "That's not happening," he whispered, voice rough but resolute. She squeezed his hand, fear and defiance mingling in the shimmer of her skin. "We stay together. Always." Navigating blind corners and precarious ladders, they reached the bay where their contact had promised a shuttle. The docking cradle was empty. Lysira's breath caught. "They've seized it." The whine of a plasma cutter echoed from the far end of the corridor, a team breaking through the next hatch. Mason spotted an emergency pod, battered but intact, its status light blinking amber. "It's not the plan, but it's all we've got." Lysira hesitated for only a second. "I trust you." He yanked open the hatch, shoving their gear inside. As Lysira sealed the door, Mason slammed his palm on the launch sequence. The pod shuddered, artificial gravity flickering. Through the viewport, a debris field spun, fractured hull plating, orphaned containers, even the skeletal remains of a derelict drone. Mason strapped in, fingers flying across the manual controls. "Hold on!" He took the pod into a wild dive, skimming the edge of a ruptured storage tank. Lysira rerouted power from environmental systems to the thrusters, overriding safeties as warning lights blazed. A hunk of metal tumbled into their path. Mason cursed, yanking the controls hard. The pod scraped past, sparks shearing across the hull. Lysira's hands danced over the auxiliary panel, restoring life support just as the air grew thin. They spiraled clear of the station, battered but intact. In the distance, Toland's ship blinked a coded beacon. One chance for rescue before security corvettes cut them off. Mason gritted his teeth, pushing the thrusters to the edge. Come on! Come on!" Lysira's fingers laced through his, anchoring him as proximity alarms shrieked. With a final burst, Mason slammed the pod into the docking ring. The locks engaged with a clang, and the hatch opened to Toland's anxious face. "Inside, now!" Toland barked. They scrambled aboard just as a squadron of security drones swarmed past, scanning the empty pod. Toland sealed the airlock, relief written in every line of his face. "You made it." Mason slumped to the deck, pulse pounding. Lysira dropped beside him, her hand never leaving his. "We're here. Did it work? Our people?" Toland's amber eyes shone with hope. "The first doses are already saving lives. Reports from Kalis and Nira, patients recovering, symptoms reversing. It's working, Lysira. Your cure is working." Mason's exhaustion faded, replaced by a surge of purpose. "Take more blood if you need it. I can keep going." But Lysira pressed a gentle hand to his chest, her gaze tender. "You've done enough. You need rest." "We all do." Toland nodded. "The Jaren know we're moving. They've tightened blockades, scanning ships, seizing medical cargo. We'll need decoys, new routes, and contacts on every world. This is no longer just science. It's war." They gathered around the battered holomap in the ship's heart, plotting their next steps. Toland's network was their lifeline, encrypted comms, hidden drop points, smugglers willing to risk everything for a vial of hope. Mason's technical skills proved invaluable. He modified beacons to mimic phantom convoys and rewired hull plating to scatter Jaren scans. Days bled into weeks, hyperspace jumps blending one crisis into the next. Every new world brought fresh danger, a checkpoint here, a traitor exposed there. But also, moments of grace. In the shadowed corridors between deliveries, Mason and Lysira found solace in each other. Sometimes it was a brush of hands as they packed serum crates, sometimes a whispered joke that broke the tension before a risky landing. At night, Lysira would curl against Mason in the narrow crew bunk, her luminous skin casting gentle light across the dark. Between missions, Toland relayed coded updates, fewer casualties on Dravas, clinics reopening on Myria, even a rumor that a Jaren captain had secretly administered the serum to his own crew. Hope was spreading faster than the plague. One night, as the ship drifted in the quiet between jumps, Lysira sat alone in the medical bay, a message trembling in her hand. Mason entered, voice soft. "News?" She looked up, pain etched in every feature. "My family. They are infected. The quarantine is strict. No one in or out." He knelt beside her, taking her hands in his. "Then we'll get the cure to them. I promise." Lysira's eyes brimmed with tears, luminous and fierce. "They're on Sereth, deep behind Jaren lines. It's impossible." Mason cupped her face, voice steady as iron. "You said it yourself. Impossible things are just things we haven't done yet." They hatched a plan, a final run through the blockade, using everything they'd learned. Decoy drones launched from the aft bay. Toland's contacts arranged a fake cargo manifest, and Mason disguised the ship's signature to mimic a freighter. Lysira coordinated with underground medics on Sarath, arranging for a covert landing zone. The approach was harrowing. Jaren patrols swept the system, scanners burning through the void. Twice they had to power down and drift, hearts in their throats as warships slid past like sharks. When they finally reached Sarath's orbit, Toland piloted a dizzying drop through the upper atmosphere, skirting detection by the thinnest margin. They landed in the dead of night, unloading crates of serum into waiting hands. Lysira led Mason through the silent city, past shuttered plazas and empty bridges. At her family's dwelling, she paused, trembling. Mason squeezed her hand, whispering, "Go to them. I'm right here." Inside, Lysira found her kin, her mother, siblings, and youngest cousin, pale but alive, the infection already taking hold. She knelt, administering the serum herself, tears slipping down her cheeks as she worked. Mason watched from the doorway, pride swelling in his chest. Hours passed. The fever broke first in Lysira's mother, then in the others. By morning, color returned to their skin, eyes brightening with recognition and relief. Lysira embraced them, laughter and sobs mingling in the quiet. When she returned to Mason, she flung her arms around him, her crown blazing with joy. "You kept your promise." He held her close, whispering, "I always will." Together, in the dawn's soft light, they watched as hope took root. Proof that even in a world torn by fear and betrayal, love and healing could win. With the cure spreading faster than the disease, the tide turned across Sarathi space. Reports flooded in from every system. Fevers breaking, quarantine wards emptying, the once hopeless drifting back into the light. Where there had been fear and silence, laughter and song returned. The conclave, cornered by irrefutable evidence and the will of the people, was forced to confront the Jaren's role in the catastrophe. Old rivalries lost their teeth. Public trials replaced secret deals, and for the first time in generations, the focus shifted from conflict to rebuilding. The underground network that had once operated in whispers now blossomed into a full-fledged coalition. Medics, scientists, and former smugglers joined hands, distributing the serum to every corner of Sarathi space. Tolan became a leader by necessity, organizing relief efforts and sharing protocols openly. No patent, no restrictions, just the promise of healing for all. Mason and Lysira watched this transformation from a tranquil world far from the politics and scars of the old wars. Their chosen home circled a gentle blue-white star, a place where the air hummed with the scent of alien flowers and the ground glowed at dusk with bioluminescent moss. The house they shared was simple, stone and crystal, half buried in a hillside that overlooked the sea. Their days fell into a quiet rhythm. In the mornings, Mason taught Sarathi children how to build wind turbines and water purifiers, his laughter ringing out across sun-dappled fields. Lysira led classes in regenerative medicine, her crown shimmering with pride as she watched former students outpace their masters. They ran a small clinic together, treating wounds and listening to stories, their work a tapestry woven from gratitude and second chances. At night, beneath a sky stitched with alien constellations, Mason and Lysira found peace in each other's arms. They explored the tidal pools, toes glowing with bioluminescent sand, or floated in the warm shallows, talking until the moons rose silver and full. The movement they had sparked, rooted in risk, hope, and love, had changed the fate of millions. But in these moments it felt like the world had grown small and intimate, shaped only by their shared heartbeat. One evening, as the sun bled gold across the horizon and the surf pulsed with lavender light, Lysira and Mason sat on the porch with mugs of spiced tea. The ocean glowed, its waves alight with drifting plankton, and the air hummed with distant music from the village below. Lysira rested her head on Mason's shoulder. "Do you miss it?" she asked, voice soft, almost afraid of the answer. "Your old life. Earth. The work you did before all this?" He was quiet for a moment, watching the tide roll in and out. "There are moments I remember," he admitted. "The smell of rain on concrete, the taste of coffee in a cold hangar. But nothing compares to this." He gestured at the world around them. Their home, the fields, the people gathered around fires on the distant shore. "I've never felt more alive, or more at home." She smiled, eyes shining with tears, not of sorrow, but of gratitude. "I thought I would spend my life in a laboratory, always searching for something just out of reach. Now I realize I have found what matters most." She turned to face him, her hands gentle on his cheek. "I have found you." He leaned into her touch, eyes bright. And I found you. Against every odd the universe could throw at us. They toasted to hope, their glasses catching the moonlight, and to each other. Mason's laughter was low and warm. Here's to a future we get to build ourselves. Lysira grinned. No more running, no more secrets. Only this, us, and the work we choose. The weeks and months that followed were filled with healing and growth. Lysira's family, once saved by the serum, visited often. Her mother tending the garden, her siblings playing with local children, their laughter mingling with Mason's as he chased them along the shore. Tolan sent regular updates, his voice always triumphant as new worlds joined the coalition. The conclave, transformed by public will, invited Lysira to speak at the Great Gathering, where she told the story of how hope had triumphed over fear and how love had been the catalyst for change. In quiet moments, Mason and Lysira watched news feeds from across the stars, cities rebuilt, Jarin and Sarathi scientists working side by side, 1,000 small miracles unfolding because they had dared to risk everything. People spoke their names with reverence, two unlikely heroes who had stood against the darkness and brought the dawn. One night, as the bioluminescent tides glimmered brighter than ever, Lysira curled beside Mason, her voice a whisper in the hush. Do you ever wonder what's next for us? He traced the curve of her jaw, his eyes full of wonder and certainty. Whatever it is, we face it together. That's all that matters. She smiled, heart full. You are my cure, Mason. My beginning. They clinked their glasses, laughter drifting out over the glowing waves, a promise echoing between them, ready to face whatever the future would bring. Across the stars, as worlds recovered and old wounds healed, people remembered the story of Mason and Lysira, bound by science, courage, and love, who had changed everything. That's the end of the story. Please do not forget to subscribe to our channel, like the video, and write in the comments what you liked most about this story. Our team will be very grateful to you. You can find even more fascinating stories on our channel. See you in the next video.